Hello and welcome to ForgeTalks, a brand new video podcast series where I speak to some of my fellow ForgeRockers on some of the biggest topics in digital identity. At ForgeRock we have an absolute plethora of brilliant and talented people. Unfortunately, none of them were available today, but thankfully Alex Laurie stepped in right at the last minute. Alex, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much, Fraser. Beautiful introduction to me there.
So we're talking today about identity experiences and specifically how digital identity enables companies to delight their customers. And this is a phrase that we hear kind of all around the place, but I'm never entirely sure what that expression delight customers means. What do we mean when we say delight customers?
I think it's a difficult term to work with because first of all, it sets the bar very, very high. You know, if you have a poor experience and you're expecting to deliver a delightful experience, the gap between the two things is quite heavy. So what we really want to talk about in terms of delightful or better identity experience are just the things that take away the friction, take away the pain for those first interactions and the ongoing interactions you have with an organization. So as a customer, you know, when I register and sign up to become, you know, to sign up to use a digital system, when I then want to go and transact, you know, and for example, I have to put in my address and some more details. And then, for example, if I want to change my preferences or reset my password, all of those experiences are actually identity experiences and they need to be frictionless. So what you tend to have is this concept of a better identity experience means less friction to the user, which means that you actually get to the value for that customer quicker. And that's really where we're coming from. And it comes from the general market trend within digital transformation for customer centricity, where you really put the customer at the very heart of everything you're doing.
Okay, and presumably this approach applies to employee interactions as well, right?
Well, yeah, we're all humans at the end of the day, and I think there has been a gap. There has been a lack of focus on employee experiences, and that's everything from the paper-based experiences of you know, registering when you join a company and, you know, sign up and sign on, do the initial sort of onboarding process. It can be quite cumbersome. I mean, my personal experience working when I was in a consultancy working on a customer site is it took us 30 days to get a login, right? 30 days before we could actually be effective, 30 days of the company paying us money to do nothing. You know, we did a lot of whiteboarding, a lot of thinking, but we couldn't actually develop applications on their system. So the experiences need to be improved for the employee to get that productivity bump straight away. I've got the right access, I've got the right applications and, you know, access to the right applications. I've got single sign-on across all my suite of applications. And if I forget my password, because we're all humans, I can reset it myself. And in an ideal world as an employee, you know, can we move towards better things such as, you know, passwordless authentication for users?
Why is it so important for companies to focus on these great identity experiences?
I think you've got two major components here. One is very human and the other is technological. Basically, in the technological paradigms are shifting. We're going to more online services. We're going to remote working. We're going to a variety of technology-enabled approaches to life, be it shopping, banking, working, anything like this. That means that you have to have fast, smooth, efficient, frictionless experiences. The other side of the coin, and this is something often forgotten, is that we're in a generational shift as well. So, you know, my generation, you know, we're used to poor experiences. We're used to having to have multiple passwords for applications at work. We're used to not that great experiences in our online services. That's because we are the pathfinders in this space. However, younger generations have come through with, you know, the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons of this world. They've grown up with that and they expect a fantastic experience. They expect that from day one. That's what they're used to. And that be that in the retail, gaming, on their iPhone, their Android phone, whatever it is, they expect those experiences. Therefore, they expect them at work and they expect them within the context of their, you know, their banking and all those sort of things. And you see this across the industry. The other side is actually my parents' generation, who have really embraced online and digital services. And because of that, what's happening is that they need a sort of a different focus on identity experiences to bring them in, to make it easier for them to do things. So, potentially an older person who might not have smartphones or might not be comfortable with multi-factor authentication may choose to use like a telephone call multi-factor authentication rather than just a straightforward Face ID on their phone. But we have to cater for these two sort of outlier generational things that are not us, and we in the industry have spent the last X years living with what we've got and just accepting it. These other two groups need this capability.
Okay, so you mentioned a few companies in there that are good examples of companies that offer some good, delightful experiences. But what does a great customer or employee experience look like? If a company's getting it absolutely right, what does that look like?
I think from a customer perspective, I would go straight to the challenger banks, the digital banks. The great experience is that, in an old-fashioned banking context, it could take weeks to open a bank account. Whereas if you're working with one of the new challenger digital startup banks that are, they're popping up all over the place. We've got huge numbers growing in the ASEAN market and in European market. These digital challenger banks, can get you onboarded as a customer in a matter of minutes. It's very simple. Open up the app, receive a magic link, confirm who you are, take a picture of an identity, take a video selfie, press a button, it gets confirmed, and your data gets added to the system. You have very little user input to do. It's quite easy. You can do it all on your mobile phone, and you can have a bank account immediately. That feels like a good experience. In fact, we were talking to the CXO, the Chief Customer Experience Officer of a major global bank, who was bemoaning the fact that his two daughters, who were in their teenage years, had gone and downloaded and started to use one of these challenger bank apps, but not the bank he worked for. And he's now sort of spending his whole time trying to make his bank as good an experience as these challenger banks. At a personal level, the other, from a corporation perspective, there are experiences, and again, it's about taking down barriers. Can I understand the context of who I am, where I am, what I'm doing, and reduce friction as a user so that I can go in and use the applications I need to use at the time I need to use them and understand who I am, rather than sort of just always hammering me for a username password, for a step-up authentication, a hard token VPN, all of these things that just put barriers in the way of me being a productive employee.
Okay, and you kind of touched on it a bit there, but what does then a bad experience look like?
I think there are so many examples.
Yeah.
I think, for me, the worst sort of experiences are the ones where you're trying to do something digitally, and you're working, on a mobile phone, particularly on a mobile phone, trying to do something digitally, and you then get driven from that digital online experience to having to call someone in a call center. And then you're sat there waiting for sort of half an hour while, terrible music plays at you. And then someone at the other end has no context of who you are, and then asks, for your inside leg measurement and, what you ate last Tuesday, and makes you re-authenticate yourself. And it becomes painful. And I personally, I've had some very, recent experiences with major British brands. And it has really driven me away from those brands because it does feel awkward. It feels painful. It wastes time. And yet other brands, you can achieve the same thing. I think it's really important that you take focus and try and stop breaking people from, breaking people's experiences and their customer journeys between, digital and offline. Sorry.
It kind of sounds like if you're getting everything right in terms of your identity experiences, that a customer or employee won't even notice you're there, won't even notice you're doing anything. And that sounds a little bit like a nice to have. But what's the flip side? Like, surely if you're not doing these things, it can be really then annoying for a customer or employee.
Yeah, I think you're right. The nice to have element is important. I think it's the invisible nature is something you can't be fully invisible. I mean, let's be honest. If you're talking about financial services or government services, citizen services, there needs to be a certain level of friction, right, to show to you as the end user that the information you're accessing, the process you're doing, the transaction you're doing has value. And it's worth bearing that in mind. But then when you do those things, you have that friction. It's an easy thing to understand. It's a Face ID, it's a biometric, it's a quick, simple process, but using other things within your the device and the experience and the behavior and the other signals to generate a better understanding of who you are and what you're doing. If you don't have these things, what you then end up doing is, again, you're breaking customer journeys. And the risk is you do two things. From a customer perspective, you drive customers away because they just say, I can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered to complete this transaction. And I personally, I've done it. I have walked away from a transaction because it's been too annoying.
Yeah, me too.
And then on the other side, from an employee perspective, what you're doing is you're effectively impacting productivity, right? These things have a direct cost. At the other end of the scale, right, what happens is I'm an employee, I have a broken identity experience, I need to reset my password. It's very difficult. I get into a loop, and then all of a sudden I'm calling the IT support service desk, creating a ticket, incurring cost, incurring pain, right, incurring time delays. And these things actually impact the bottom line of a business from a customer and from an employee perspective.
Yeah, so true. Okay, so imagine I'm in charge of a company's identity experiences. I'm currently offering a poor experience and I want to deliver a great experience. What is your top tip for me?
I think the first place to go and look is within either your IT service desk support team or your customer contact center, and go and look at the data that's around these things, around customer onboarding, password reset, device registration, multi-factor device registration and choice, preferences setting, profile updating, these areas here that are all very much related to the identity of the user, the employee or the customer, right? Go and look at those the numbers of times that they are impacted. Do an analysis of those journeys and see if you can adjust those experiences by looking at what you can do around automated onboarding, digital onboarding, better UI UX around customer self-service password reset, offering choice around multi-factor. These are all things that can be brought in using your identity and access management solutions. That these things exist. You can bring them to bear and then test those metrics again. So starting, look at what you're doing and record your metrics, and then record your metrics and compare. It's a very simple process. It's time and motion. It's being done time immemorial, and it can be done here to really hit an impact.
All right, that sounds like great advice for everyone watching. Go out and do that. Alex, thank you so much for joining me on this call today. I hope you stay safe and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you, Fraser. Yeah, you too.
And guys, thank you very much for watching and look forward to seeing you next time.